Well, thanks for joining our conversation with John Halpin, who is president and executive editor of the Liberal Patriot, an online publication that you should all check out on through via Substack. Before taking on that role, John was a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress for many years, almost 20, more than 15, almost 20, I think. And there's a piece we saw by John to which we'll make reference later and discuss that got our attention in particular. But before we get to it, what, John, is a liberal patriot?
Well, first, Michael, thanks for having me. And I really appreciate the work you guys are doing on your end. What is a liberal patriot? I mean, the easiest way to understand it is someone who loves freedom and their country. The way, if you break down the two components of it, liberal, the way we use it in all three senses. One, the liberal-minded person is someone who's open to alternative ideas, kind of tries to be based in reason and civil discourse, pluralism, tolerance, that notion of being liberal. There's the philosophical notion of liberalism that we believe in deeply, and we think is core to the entire American project. It has both a conservative and a more center-left sort of variation, but it's a belief in the Constitution, the rule of law, things of that nature, free enterprise, civil liberties, civil rights. So the entire history of Enlightenment liberalism in its American version. And then we personally, the group I work with and the other editors at TLP, we're FDR liberals. And so, the four freedoms to us is just an essential definition of what it means to be American. You believe in, freedom of speech and worship and freedom from want and fear. And I don't think anyone, in my mind, has improved on those core values. You could debate what each element has, but I think it's a pretty good understanding of what it means to be an American. So we kind of believe deeply in that old FDR notion of being a liberal. And the Patriot side is easy. I mean, it's a love of country, and that's almost a little too pap. I mean, we toyed with the idea of calling it the liberal nationalists because we believe in economic nationalism, but we figured the word gets people a little bit upset, so we went with patriot, and they're not interchangeable; they're different. And our version of nationalism would be a liberal version, which is the core beliefs and values and structures of the United States are something worth respecting and living up to and trying to advance. In terms of patriotism and nationalism, we also think it's critical that all public policy is geared towards American interests. We think a lot of discourse in modern times has just gone away from that. There's sort of crazy extreme ideas that undermine America's overall strength, either economically or in national security terms. So we settled on the liberal patriot. And plus, it also, when you put a "the" in front of it, it looks like an old pamphlet from the 18th century or something like that. So
yeah,
that's the origin.
I'm interested to hear that you're considered nationalist. Actually, that would have been provocative. But okay, you mentioned it now, so we'll consider that provocative enough. I want to play grad student word games with you now, but that would waste time. But I assume you would acknowledge, I don't know, do I say admit, it's possible to be an illiberal patriot or no?
Oh, it absolutely is. I don't think it works in the American context, because you can't say you love America and then not believe in the rule of law and constitutionalism and civil rights and civil liberties. You can be Viktor Orban and be a Hungarian patriot who's proudly illiberal, and he gets large numbers of votes, and that's their system. You can have illiberal views and still love your country. I don't think it works as a project to think of the better part of the country being illiberal, and I don't it doesn't make sense. But it's not our job to label people patriots or unpatriotic, but you have to have some lines, right? And if you don't believe in the fundamental structure or values of the country, you ought to look at yourself in the mirror and say, maybe I'm not a patriot then. But these words, as you say, people have different interpretations of them. I mean, I don't really get too much into labels, but you need to give people some understanding of what you believe, and that's the best we can come up with.
Yeah. When you came up with it, you were sitting around at a table, probably enjoying yourselves, looking forward to the new project. How did you end up at that table? What did you do beforehand?
So my background is mostly, well, I was in academic political science and got out of the academic track and got into political campaigns and public opinion work in the United States and in Europe and in Israel and other places across the world. And then I moved over to a new think tank that had been established during the Bush years, Center for American Progress, and I was there for almost 20 years. And I basically, really, Teixeira and I, we long-term colleagues, and we run the Liberal Patriot together with Peter Jewell and Brian Katulis. We ran the politics arm of CAP. So, and it was mostly like the poli-sci arm. So studying all the papers we've written are about what's the path to 270, and it was examine how the two parties could amass some kind of electoral coalition to win in consecutive presidential elections. So I mostly did that, did a lot of public opinion work. But my academic background is in political theory more. I studied survey research and things like that as well. So I've always had an interest in like the history of liberalism, conservatism, various strands of radicalism. You know, I like to study ideas and the development and spread of them. So that's what I did. And you know, what the newsletter format gives us a lot of opportunity to write about whatever we want. So sometimes we write about philosophy, sometimes we write about history, sometimes we write about politics, a lot of politics, because that's what people expect from us. But I think it's more enjoyable to kind of blend them all, because if you just do contemporary politics, you'll lose your mind. So
yeah. And the Liberal Patriot, the publication now, you have your own nonprofit status?
Yeah. So we're set up as a C4 so we can cover elections and things like that. We're not planning to intervene. It's almost entirely C3 like. But you know, it's a publication first and foremost, so the organization just supports that. We're not really planning to do a whole lot, like host events and things like the typical stuff that other nonprofits would do. We just have it's just a setup to do it. And you know, we thought about possibly setting up as a media company, but none of us are media people. We're not. Our background's not in journalism; it's in politics and policy. So we decided a nonprofit structure was the best way to go. So
yeah. And one more. This might be nitpicking. When you were at CAP, were you working for both the C3 and the C4, or one or the other? Or I mean, the way you described your work,
it's a good question. I mean, we'll probably get to this in a bit about what happens with some of the blending of them in the new places. But yeah, I mean, technically, I did almost all my work under the C3, so that's why we would make it political science like. But you know, I got involved in a fair number of C4 projects, mostly things like, for us, we were interested in helping to advance the Obama healthcare plan and things like that, because we helped write it. So whatever people think about that, it was like we thought it was good for the country. We wanted to see it get promoted and get implemented correctly. So that was some C4 activity we did. And a lot of the polling I've done, public opinion research, it just tries to be more sort of academic, like Pew like, you know, try and like actually understand what people believe, not just do advocacy. So I think that kind of polling is much more interesting. So I led a number of projects around criminal justice reform, healthcare, education, you know, any number of issues. We did a big national security project on, you know, U.S. foreign policy attitudes. So that's my background.
Great. So why don't we finish with part one there and come back with part two in a bit here.
That's good.